Pisces and Gemini. Interesting relationship, to be sure. Sweet relationship. Really nice, flowing, fluid relationship. Um, Man, some of my really great friends are Pisces, and the interaction between a Gemini and Pisces at its best is just magical. I mean, everything around Pisces at its best is magical, but there's such a beautiful motion to this relationship. You have two mutable signs here, one water, one air. And even though water and air can be very different, water is much more emotional into the introspective, reflective side of life, very much more interior, you know. Um, and air, Gemini in this case, is very logical, intellectual, likes to talk and communicate and understand patterns and ideas and concepts. They can clash sometimes, and there's some challenges with any air-water relationship, and we'll get to those. But the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful side of this relationship is, and any actually water and air together relationship, is when they work out their differences, they just have a really amazing time. I don't know how else to put it. It's just there's good feelings back and forth, and these two signs look out for each other in really special ways. And even again, though they can be so very different, when they've worked out those differences, it's just magical. And in this case specifically, with Gemini and Pisces, um, yes, they are different, but they're both mutable signs. And again, that can be the source of some challenges, and we'll get there. But it's also the source of a lot of familiarity, a lot of understanding back and forth. With my Piscean friends, me being a Gemini, in our relationship, the mutability, which by the way is very much scattered energy, the four mutable signs are very much, um, they kind of go off in all directions at once. And in this case, we have mental Gemini and emotional Pisces, and when they go off in all these directions at once, it can be really exciting, but also really confusing. And there have been many times when it's just me and my Pisces friend talking in a group, because nobody else really understands what's going on, or there's little, especially when the Pisces and the Gemini have gotten to know each other. There's so many little nuances, tiny little nuances that only they understand, and it just gets better with time because those little understandings, those little jokes, private everything, it just gets more fun with time as both of these signs learn to feel out each other and to naturally, there's naturally an affinity being mutable signs. And even though Gemini and Pisces don't always understand each other, whereas Gemini, many a times there's been experiences where I'm talking with my Piscean friends, and even as melded as we are and whatnot, through time and just enjoyment spent together, there are definitely some times when I, as a Gemini, have to scratch my head and be like, "What on earth are they talking about?" or "What do they mean?" Or there's some confusion because these are mutable signs and they go off, like I said, in all different directions. And Pisces is water, is emotional. They're different from Gemini and vice versa. And so sometimes being so watery and dreamy and very very emotional, and as we know, emotions change rapidly, especially for Pisces. Uh, it can get kind of confusing. And I think that's actually probably the biggest challenge in this relationship is, confusion in relationships is totally fine if we can work through it and figure it out, and know that even if we don't necessarily figure it out, as long as we know that it's not hostile, that everything's okay between the two people, then things are cool. But in this relationship, it can be very challenging when confusion and miscommunication gets in the way. Um, Especially if the Pisces has Mercury in Pisces and the Gemini has Mercury in Gemini, uh, there can be some pretty horrendous miscommunications between these two signs, and it goes vice versa. It's not just Pisces being like dreamy and vague sometimes, but it can be also Gemini just being so excitable. Many a time has it happened where, because I'm me, I can't help being me and expressing my energies. As a Gemini, I'm very much scattered, and I'm here, and I'm there, and I'm here, and so there's been so many times when I've said something, and I can tell by the reaction or by the words coming back at me from my Piscean friends that I'm not completely understood, because my mind, again, we're different people. No matter what the two signs are, these are different individuals. And let alone that, we do have two signs that are just very different in a lot of ways, Pisces and Gemini. And there have been many times when I've said something and it's taken the wrong way, or it's confused, and again, at the worst of it, there's hard feelings where there's absolutely none meant whatsoever, and that goes vice versa. Again, that's not inevitability. Again, in any relationship, communication can get rid of all negativity and all confusion and miscommunication and whatnot. And that sticking together, and also not taking everything to recognize confusing times as confusing times, and not taking it personally, I think, is very important, and not reacting right after the bat, because both these signs are very immediate, signs. And for the Gemini part of it, it's very important to kind of keep your nerves in check, I've found, in this relationship, and to just trust. There have been many times when I've sat there and I'm like, not only was that confusing, I'm pretty sure that was insulting me in some way, from a miscommunication with a Pisces. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's just wait and see, because I think that this is definitely some kind of something weird is going on, and I know my sweet Piscean friend would never do anything to intentionally hurt me, unless they have Venus in Aries and they're out to get me. But chances are my Piscean friend still is a sweetheart, and they don't want to hurt me, so I'll just see. And every time in those circumstances, I've a couple moments later, it became clear, oh no, that's what they meant. They were talking about that, and I just thought it was this. Oh, there's so many times with my Piscean friends where I'm like, oh, duh, okay, now I get it. And I know vice versa, it's the same, where I've said something, it doesn't quite make sense, and then, maybe I'll say something else to clarify, or just in the natural passage of time, it becomes clear, oh, that's what they meant. So I think that's really the biggest challenge in this relationship, is to get caught up in the differences of communicative styles between these two people, because these people are very sensitive, very sensitive. Gemini is sensitive in a mental, intellectual fashion, and Pisces is sensitive in an emotional fashion. And sometimes they can rub each other the wrong way. Pisces can feel like, I can't rely on Gemini at all. They're so airy and intangible, and they're here, now they're there, and I'm confused. That's a challenge. And that's very true, that sometimes Gemini is going to be annoyingly airy for Pisces, and whereas Pisces might have a bad day and they could really use some cheering up, Gemini is off with another friend, maybe not intentionally, they're just, because Geminis are just always on the go and whatnot, but also, and this is a challenge for Gemini in this relationship, they could be running from the emotions, and that's really, I think, the biggest challenge for Gemini specifically, is to not run from the emotional profundity of any water sign, let alone Pisces. And Pisces really, they're so sensitive that they need to cry sometimes, and that can really make an air sign uncomfortable, especially Gemini. We'll just be, we'll be caring and attentive at our better levels, our better expressions, or we'll just run. And that's at some point, air signs and Geminis especially need to learn to deal with their emotions, and to deal with the emotions of others in a way that's a little bit more mature, a little bit more developed. It's very much the challenge for air to just always be flitting about and go to wherever it seems most bright and positive. But of course, as any air sign knows, life is about duality. It's about darkness as well as light. And we need to embrace the darkness and embrace those really emotional times, as well as living from our heads and being very intellectual. So that's really important. And on the Piscean perspective, for really both perspectives, it's really important to let each person have their freedom and to have their space. That's really important. Gemini likes to talk a lot. Pisces likes to feel a lot. Gemini doesn't always like to feel, and Pisces doesn't always like to talk. And so in this relationship, the Gemini it's really important for us to let conversation go when it needs to be, and to just, if we need to, because we need constant stimulation as Geminis, then find it somewhere else to think, while you're chilling with your Pisces friend, lover, business partner, whatever, to let your mind just go free at those times and not have to keep up conversation all the time. which is great because again, Pisces loves to space out. I have a lot of Pisces myself, and I just love to just sit here alone, or if I'm with somebody else, that's cool. But in those times, I just need to be quiet and let myself dream and float away into the mists of life. And that's really annoying when you're trying to do that in an air sign, especially Gemini, is trying to talk to you about something. And very often, you know, in the lower stages of Gemini, it's talking just to talk. And water is very sensitive. They're going to be able to feel if you're talking out of pure interest, or, and you know, this is, as a Gemini with Mercury and Gemini, it's been my challenge to learn how to not talk just to talk. Water is going to feel if it's talking just to talk or not. And they're going to react not so, I mean, they're not going to probably call you out on it unless they have a lot of Aries or a lot of Aquarius, but probably they'll be more down to talk if they have Aquarius. But water isn't direct, but it's very powerful, even if it's subtle. And, you know, if the Gemini is being boring, or rather, if they're talking out of boredom, they're not talking out of interest, then the Pisces is going to just float away. In that moment, they'll float away, you know, mentally and emotionally, but overall, they will eventually float away from that person. So, a little bit of awareness goes a long way in this relationship, and it goes both ways. Both signs need to be aware of each other, even just a tiny little bit, about each other's energies and each other's predilections, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. And the beautiful thing is naturally these two signs, even though there's definitely some bumps in the road, they figure it out eventually, because both signs are naturally interested in each other. They're naturally Gemini finds Pisces so imaginative and dreamy and always talking about interesting things, and very much they have a lot of in common about music, about art, about perspectives on life itself. Pisces is very philosophical. This is a very interesting relationship, because Pisces' partner sign is Virgo, and both Gemini and Virgo are ruled by the same planet Mercury, and of course Gemini's partner sign is Sag, and Sag and Pisces are both ruled by Jupiter. So they have you know, a natural affinity as per planets, but it's the different side of it. Whereas ultimately a Pisces needs to find somebody with a lot of Virgo energy. It could be Gemini, but Gemini with Moon or rising Virgo, and you know, the Gem needs to find some Sag energy in that person. Again, it could be a Pisces if that person has a lot of Sag. But when you get Gemini and Pisces, or Virgo and Sag for that matter, but that's a whole other video, when you get these two signs together, they're so fascinated by each other. It's not quite, you know, again, it's not quite the match made in heaven, true love type energy as the partner signs. And again, don't freak out if you guys are lovers in Gemini and Pisces. I've seen it happen before. It totally can work out. You just gotta have those partner signs somewhere in the chart. And look for the houses too. You know, it could be in the houses, Sun or Moon in the house of Sag, for example, if you're the Pisces, whatever. Long story short, yeah, those energies gotta be there somehow. But this is a beautiful relationship because Gemini, again, although needing that fiery Jupiterian energy of Sag, is still all the more captivated, as much captivated by the watery part of Jupiter. It's still very philosophical. Pisces is incredibly philosophical and always looking to understand why, how, why are we here, what are we existing for, what, you know, just they're asking all these questions that Gemini is naturally like, yeah, I love asking those questions. I never thought about that. Let's talk about this more. Of course, you know, within reason for the Pisces. Gemini could talk for forever. For the Pisces, like, okay, yeah, let's talk about this until, you know, I need to dream and space out. And the vice versa is true as well. Pisces looks at Gemini, and although it's not the grounded, you know, very cutely analytical Virgo and energy person that they're ultimately looking for, they're still fascinated by the quickness of Gemini that they share with Virgo, the intelligence that they share with Virgo. And, you know, being an air sign, Gemini thinks very abstractly and very much just out in the clouds, and we use all kinds of words, and we're constantly just growing in our mind. And of course that grows every other part of our life, but it's an interesting perspective for the Pisces to be with somebody who's very much complementary to them. I find that these two signs have a lot of happy accidents. Gemini is talking to Pisces about X, and Pisces out of X, which is maybe no doubt from Gemini as being very logical and thought out, and even though the points can seem so disparate, as very often happens with Geminian talk, um, Gemini's having the conversation with Pisces. Pisces isn't seeing X, they're seeing Y. But Y is beautiful, it has those words brought up such imagery, and it's very inspiring. And so even though Pisces, this is a very interesting relationship, and I think this is really important to know in this relationship, so you don't take things the wrong way. Um, there's been the temptation in the past where I'm talking, and my Piscean friends don't quite understand exactly what I'm saying, but they get something very much enriching out of it anyways, and it sparks all sorts of interesting new conversations, and it just goes off in a whole other way. Um, as the Gemini, you gotta be patient, and that's not our strongest suit, but it is important to learn patience and to learn that a little bit of water is good. It's not a bad thing um, to kind of derail from the super logical, pattern and plan oriented thinking of Gemini, of air in general, and to kind of go a little bit sideways. In fact, and this is the beautiful reward for being tolerant of this, is it is a different perspective, and Gemini is always looking for different perspectives. It enriches our lives to have different perspectives. And whereas they were seeing something, say, two-dimensional before, with that Piscean help, it becomes three-dimensional, because Pisces took it and went a completely different direction. And instead of going, no, that's not what I was talking about, I was talking about this, and I've done that, and it's really important to not do that sometimes, to just let it see how it goes. Because very often, in fact, when I've let it go wherever it's needed to go, it turned out even more beautiful than I could have imagined before, when I was trying to order it and figure it out logically and intellectually, and have it abstractly but still in my brain and all that. When I just let it flow, it could go in a completely different direction. In fact, it usually does with my Piscean friends, but we're having the conversation for a reason. There's no accident, there's no coincidence in life. And I always find myself enriched by that different perspective. It's a very beautiful relationship. And the reverse is true too. Pisces, sometimes their communicative style can very much be just a deluge of emotion, just whoosh. And it can get frustrating for the Pisces to not have that immediate earth comfort. Because again, Gemini is an air sign, and even though it's so much in common with Virgo, Earth, Virgo, air, Gemini, very different. And it can be very frustrating when, Pisces is just a flood going off in all sorts of different directions, and very emotional, and Gemini kind of hovers above it. I really urge you, as the Pisces in this, and speaking from my Pisces with Geminian friends, to also have a little bit of patience, and to know that yes, the conversation's happening for a reason. Like I was just saying, nothing is a coincidence, and there's a reason that Gemini is hovering above like that. And in those situations, I find that the Geminian perspective of that flood really helps Pisces. Gemini can be very much like a doctor, very clinical and kind of cold, because we're very logical. We're trying to figure things out. And instead of going, oh, poor Pisces, oh, hug, oh, Gemini is more like, okay, so why are you feeling that way? What happened a couple hours ago that's now leading to this? Let's analyze this. Let's figure it out. Let's look into the past. We'll just understand the present. Let's see the near future. Let's figure this out. And Pisces can be like, no, I'm just trying to, the temptation can be to just, no, I'm trying to express my emotions. Yes, it's up to you guys to find the healthy boundaries of this. Because sometimes, yes, Gemini does need to be a bit more sympathetic, very much so, and to kind of go, oh, that sucks, dude. I'm sorry. And sometimes their analysis isn't necessarily needed. It's just more, they're being there to be a good friend and to comfort. And maybe later on, in fact, no doubt later on, when the emotions have kind of stilled and the flood is gone, maybe then that's when the analysis comes in. And speaking on the Piscean behalf, it's really important too to honor, never limit your emotions. But you should know that Gemini is not really an emotional character. It's not a very, emotionally effusive. Well, we are very effusive in general, and certainly about emotions sometimes. But we don't necessarily want to be bogged down by how much everything sucks. We don't really get that kind of, again, the purging of dark waters that water energy people get by complaining, or not even so much complaining, but venting. Getting those emotions out with a trusted loved one. So again, don't limit your emotions. It's important to have a friend, even if they're flighty Gemini, who cares about your emotions and very much is able to support you in whatever you need. But at the same time, you should be aware that Gemini is not going to be the motherly influence like Cancer. Now, maybe they have Mercury, Venus, and Cancer. In that case, okay, things change. But in general, even a Gemini with all that other water, they're just not so much into the. It sounds so cold, but we're just not so much into the crying thing. It's just not how we work. If we have a problem, we think about it, we figure it out. I mean, sure, we cry, we're human, but at the same time, it's definitely not. I can go a long time without crying because that's not my first impulse. And, that carries over into everything in my life. I have that energy, that aura around me. And that can be disconcerting, that kind of airy coldness. It's a nice breeze, but again, you can't hold on to a breeze. A breeze isn't too comfortable when you're worried about something, like water usually is. And again, that's something else. It's important to not get caught up in the dark waters of oneself, to have that water flowing. And that's the most beautiful part about this relationship, is they complement each other so well. If they get over the little communication mishaps and they give each other the space they need, they can figure out anything together. They have wonderful conversations. They really enrich each other's lives in beautiful ways, and it just gets better with time, because again, they're so fascinated by each other. They see each other as quirky, and that kind of nice quirkiness is good for anyone in their lives. Again, and I say this every video, every composite video, is. It's really important for both of these individuals, no matter what their energies are, to be happy, to love themselves, to find their gifts, and to express them in the world. Whatever those gifts may be, whether that's a wonderful knack for cleaning, or that's a wonderful knack for international politics, or whatever, it doesn't matter. The energies don't matter as much as people's healthy souls, I guess you could say. If you have a Gemini and a Pisces, and the Gemini is acting from lower order Gemini, it's not going to work. And it's going to be really hard, and it's not going to be very healthy. And so the Gemini needs to figure their shit out. And vice versa. It doesn't matter, whatever the sun sign, whatever any of the energies are, if you're not loving yourself and finding ways to love yourself, because I know sometimes it's hard for all of us, and finding your presence, being in your presence. If you're not a healthy individual, you can't be in a healthy relationship, whether that's a partnership, a friendship, business, whatever. So, yeah. But two healthy individuals, Pisces and Gemini, my God, this is an amazing relationship. And they help each other interpret their lives and to move forward. And they're just so full of love and affection back and forth. They express it in different ways. Pisces is much more to be the kind of tearful, oh, I love you. Gemini can say I love you, but they're going to be not so much tearful, and they're going to kind of say it in a clever, funny way. But the love is very real between these two energies once they get past those little communication mishaps. Namaste.